Hi, and welcome to Infertility Unfiltered, where fertility experts and warriors are joining forces to provide you with tips, tricks, information, and all of the things so that you can take back control of your life and get your baby on board. Hi, I'm Jennifer Robertson, and today we are joined by Stefanie Valakas. Now, Stefanie, fondly known as the Dietologist, is an expert fertility dietitian and nutritionist, helping women and couples to enhance their diet to optimize their fertility. She's passionate about raising awareness of the importance of nutrition in fertility through her popular social media accounts, The Dietologist and the Dietitian on Instagram. She's also the host of the chart-topping podcast, Fertility Friendly Food, and has created the online program, The Waiting Game, to help women find clarity when it comes to fertility nutrition. Now, today we're going to be talking about a really big topic. We're going to be talking about endometriosis and how food can play a role in alleviating some of the symptoms, including what kind of diets work best. And if you stick around to the end, Steph is also going to tell you how you can get your hands on her endo diet quiz as well. So thank you so much for joining us, Stefanie Valakas.
Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks for having me.
Now, before we start talking about endometriosis and the foods that they can eat, do you just want to tell us just a snippet about what led you down this path?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a dietitian and nutritionist, and we're kind of trained in a general capacity to help people with their nutrition and their diet and their lifestyles. But I became quite passionate about preconception and fertility nutrition soon after I became a dietitian, and really went down that pathway as I saw it as the ultimate form of preventative nutrition in helping future generations reduce the risk of disease, but also helping couples to enhance their fertility. And I kind of saw it as like being the responsible parent before becoming a parent. And then recently I have specialized further into endometriosis and fertility, and that has come after my own personal diagnosis of endometriosis last year, and really seeing how much my clients struggle with getting scientific information about endometriosis, being taken seriously, and actually giving a voice for what nutrition and diet can do to, as part of multidisciplinary management of endometriosis, whether you're trying to conceive or not, but especially amongst those who are trying to conceive as well.
And I think it's such a big topic as well. And I don't know whether it's increased in terms of the number of cases, or just whether we're being able to diagnose it now a little bit more. I think a lot of the time, if we have painful periods, we just assume that it's a part of being a woman, and we just suck it up and don't do anything about it. Whereas now I feel like we're really advocating for ourselves and going, no, something's not right. Like this, like we need to investigate a little bit further. So can you tell us just a little bit about, like, what is endometriosis?
Yes, absolutely. So endometriosis, excuse me. So endometriosis is a chronic inflammatory condition that affects women, and typically women of reproductive age. And it is where the endometrial tissue that typically lines the uterus, that similar type of tissue is starting to go a bit rogue and is growing outside of this space. And so it can grow on the ovaries, inside the fallopian tubes, on the bowel, and even further up inside the body. And this can create pain. It can create the organs to kind of stick together. And it ultimately creates this kind of inflammatory environment within the pelvic region, and also even sometimes in the abdominal region as well.
Okay. And so sorry, you've just been diagnosed with it. So can you just talk us through, if you don't mind, like your personal experience, like what led you to go, okay, I've got it now? Like, do you believe that you've always had it?
I think I probably started getting symptoms about 5 years ago. And it was something that I did bring up to my GP at the time, even though I was studying at university, and I didn't have a good understanding of what it was as I do now, but I knew about it. And I was on the pill at the time. And so I said, oh, do you think it could be endometriosis, and that the pill is kind of hiding some of the symptoms? Because my very first symptoms were breakthrough bleeding on the pill. I was bleeding through active pills, and just, constantly spotting having 2 periods a month, and they weren't painful on the pill or anything like that, but I just thought, this isn't normal. Like, none of my friends complain about this, and this is very inconvenient. I thought that was the whole point of being on the pill, was to know exactly when your period's going to come, but that was just not the case for me. And then as that happened, and we changed pills about 1,000 times, and then a few years later, I had this pretty intense lower right-sided pain one weekend, and I thought I had appendicitis. And so I did all sorts of scans and tests, and they just said, oh, you've got right ovarian pain. That was my diagnosis. And I was like, okay. They'll like, come back next cycle when it hurts again. And I was like, but I'm on the pill. It's got nothing to do with my cycle. And I went back basically 2 days later being like, I'm still in pain. I ended up getting referred to a gastroenterologist, did a colonoscopy, and found an ulcer in my bowel, in a very odd place, but exactly where my pain was. So I thought, oh, that's the answer. I have a little bit of irritable bowel syndrome, which is really commonly co-diagnosed, but also diagnosed before endometriosis. And I've got this ulcer in my bowel that explains everything. And then last year I decided to go off the pill to see what my cycle was doing. And I definitely had heavier flow and some pain, nothing unmanageable, like I didn't need medication, but I was like, this is what a period looks like without the pill. That's not so fun. And honestly, it was working with clients that made me realize that this could be my own reality, because I had so many clients who had been trying to conceive, weren't having any success, and they were being investigated, and they had no symptoms of endometriosis, but it wasn't until they had a laparoscopy, which is a keyhole surgery that's used to visualize endometriosis, confirm the diagnosis, and often excise or cut it out and remove it. Their only symptoms before that was infertility and fatigue, and often no pain, no irregular periods, no heavy bleeding, no ovulation pain, no pain with sex, no pain with bowel motions or urination. Some of the typical symptoms that we see, it is just such a uniquely, like it presents so uniquely in each woman that's what makes it so difficult to diagnose. And in addition to diagnose it, it's one of the most invasive forms of diagnosis for any kind of gynecological condition. An ultrasound often won't visualize it. You know, CT scans or MRIs often won't visualize it. So it literally, you need to go in for a surgery. And also, there's also a limitation in how many surgeons are actually highly trained to perform this type of surgery as well. So there's lots of different things that take into account, but I think, yes, it's a combination of awareness that's been growing that has led to increases in diagnosis. But there's some other theories out there too, that whether we are being more exposed to xenoestrogens, and these are kind of foreign estrogens that combined in our bodies, as endometriosis is an estrogen dependent condition, that potentially our increased exposure to plastics and pesticides and other kind of environmental factors is maybe increasing the incidence of endometriosis. But we've had such poor diagnosis of it in the last century that, is it just we're actually diagnosing it now? It's very, very hard to know. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the next few decades in terms of statistics, to see how things change and unfold.
Absolutely. And so for people who do know, or who have, you know, the outward symptoms of it, how can we use our diet to alleviate the symptoms and the pain?
Yeah, so unfortunately there's no cure for endometriosis, so you can cut it out and remove it, but even then people can remain symptomatic, and it can of course grow back in many circumstances. And until we really have a cure for it, it's just about management. And there's, besides using different kind of hormonal treatment strategies, which obviously are not indicated when you're trying to conceive, because many of them are contraceptives, you really don't have a lot to work with from a medical standpoint. So we do have to look at things like diet and lifestyle alongside other therapies, like pelvic physiotherapy is a really popular one that many of my clients use as well as some of the Eastern medicines like acupuncture as well. And so combining all these different things and finding kind of what works for you is really what it's all about, to help you enhance your management. And so obviously I come in from the dietary perspective as a dietitian to help you with that. And so some of the key things that I help my clients do is to increase the anti-inflammatory foods in their diet overall to help with some of the inflammation, which can help alleviate some of the pain around the cycle and also just improve quality of life in between.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of the key things I get them to focus on are a rainbow of fruits and vegetables, and as well herbs and spices.
Mm-hmm.
And really increasing their oily fish intake. So salmon, trout, mackerel, sardines, and anchovies. All these foods have lots of anti-inflammatory components, which can really go a long way when you do it every single day and you really make a concerted effort. It can make such a big difference to the symptom profile of endometriosis and even have an impact on inflammatory markers as well. And that can help enhance egg quality as well and increase your chances of a fertilized embryo actually sticking around, because that inflammatory environment for a fertilized embryo can be a little bit hostile, as they say. And so we want to try and create a really nourishing and friendly environment for an embryo to kind of snuggle in and stick around for us as well.
Yeah. And so what would be the top 3 foods that they should really, and I'm hesitant to say focus on, because you don't want to say pineapples and then everyone just eats pineapples and doesn't eat anything else. Like, what are the 3 things that they really should introduce, and perhaps what are the things that they should avoid as well?
I think it's hard because, yeah, you're right. Like, often people will just go, well, then I'll just eat that all the time. And it's actually about variety as much as possible. So the top 3 things that I would say I would recommend blanketly almost to everyone with endometriosis pretty safely is to use extra virgin olive oil, and a really good quality one that's high in antioxidants. It's going to have a more beneficial fatty acid profile, and it also helps your body absorb more of the antioxidants in the fruits and veggies that you cook it in. So it is a very versatile oil. It can be used in all kinds of cooking. A lot of people get worried about smoke points and whether it's safe to cook with at high temperatures, and it absolutely is. The antioxidants in the olive actually help stabilize the oil and make it actually one of the safest oils to cook with at home. So I get all my clients to use a good quality extra virgin olive oil, and interestingly, olives contain this antioxidant called oleocanthal, and that actually behaves similar to ibuprofen in the body, which is a very popular medication, over-the-counter medication that women with endometriosis use for pain. Now, obviously, it doesn't work at the scale of, say, ibuprofen, but it can have a long-term impact in terms of an anti-inflammatory in the body. So extra virgin olive oil is really high on my list. The second would probably be some kind of oily fish, whether it be salmon, trout, mackerel, anchovies, or sardines, at least 2 to 3 times per week for those healthy omega-3 fats. You've also got some zinc and other great nutrients in there that are really helpful. And the last one is probably Brazil nuts, because they're rich in selenium and zinc as well. There's been some research into selenium, as it is also an antioxidant in helping with endometriosis as well. So they would be my top 3. You literally only need 1 Brazil nut a day to reach your selenium requirements. So you certainly don't need to be.
We don't want to overdose on them.
No, you don't want to overdose on it. So you just, take a 1 Brazil nut at a time each day, and it's great to help support your thyroid health as well. So that's a nice little added bonus.
Mm-hmm. And are there any triggers? Are there any things that kind of set it off?
This is truly unique for every woman. So I would say there's some women who literally would say that they don't find any relationship between food intake and their symptoms. However, I do find there tends to be a kind of group of culprits that is common for people. One being alcohol. I tend to find alcohol intake can trigger a flare-up or can worsen symptoms. The other one sometimes is caffeine intake or excess caffeine. Sometimes that can trigger more bowel movements, and that can create some discomfort as well. And then the last one is kind of the realm of FODMAPs, which is fermentable fibers in food. Like I kind of hinted to before, about 50% of women with endometriosis will also receive a diagnosis of irritable bowel syndrome. And so FODMAPs is a university-designed diet by Monash University in Melbourne that has been shown to enhance the management of irritable bowel syndrome. However, We've also replicated this in an endometriosis population and shown similar success rates of about 50 to 80% improvement in bowel-related symptoms. But overall, if your bowel is less bloated and distended, that can also help with endometriosis-related pain. And so it is a technique I use with some of my clients. However, it is quite a confusing, restrictive, and like you have to approach that diet with some caution, and you certainly would not do it unsupervised in any capacity. You do really need to work with a dietitian, because unfortunately I've seen it go wrong for a lot of people who haven't, leading to nutrient deficiencies and just misery. It's not fun. So when you work with a dietitian, you'll be able to focus on what you can eat, and also have a good idea of that it's not a long-term dietary pattern. It's a way to find out what your personal trigger foods are, and then liberalizing from there.
Okay, so there's not one diet that they should follow or anything like that. It's just a matter of following the do's, the don'ts, and you know, working out what works best for you.
Yeah.
Do you have any other pieces of advice for someone who is suffering from endometriosis, things that have worked for you?
Yeah, I think it's really easy to jump into the world of social media, especially I find Facebook groups, and you know, when you're in a place where you're not feeling great, it's easy to become desperate and wanting anything or everything to help you. And I totally hear you, but the thing is, you don't want to rush into something and invest time, energy, and money into something that just isn't researched to actually help you. And so I just really warn people against kind of jumping into these things, because it may have worked for everybody else, but doesn't really mean it's going to work for you necessarily. And so I really actually encourage my clients to actually get rid of all that stuff. Yeah. I'm just like, look, you know, if we're going to work together, this is about you exploring your body, understanding how your body reacts to different foods and different things in your lifestyle, and nobody else's. Because I just tend to find my clients end up feeling extraordinarily overwhelmed, very, very stressed, and their mental health suffers. And that can be a trigger in and of itself for poor gut symptoms and endo flares itself. So, I mean, personally, I felt pressure to follow certain dietary patterns since I've been diagnosed. So I felt like, oh, maybe I should go gluten-free. Maybe I should, you know, remove dairy from my diet. I had done the FODMAP diet myself ages before I was diagnosed with endometriosis. But what I found was after my surgery that I could eat more foods because my gut felt better. I had better tolerance. I could eat more widely. But I don't know why, but I felt like this pressure, like I should be doing more and being more restrictive. And I think people default to this answer of restriction will give me a benefit, but that's not always true. Sometimes liberalizing gives you a benefit. And so, yeah, I just encourage people not to see it as so black and white. And you know, gluten isn't the devil in and of itself, and dairy isn't the devil in and of itself, and sugar isn't the devil in and of itself, nor is soy the devil in and of itself. And it's about what works for your body. And I'm not to say that that doesn't work for some people, and absolutely does, but I don't think it's blanket advice that we should be giving, because it does come with risks.
Absolutely. Now, how can they get their hands on the quiz that you've got there as well? And how can they get in contact with you as well? If they're not already following you on social media, I'll put your links in the details below. They should be. I love your page. I love what you put up there. So how can they get their hands on your quiz as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will leave the link down below to head to the quiz, which is going to tell you which endometriosis diet type you are. So I see 4 main diet types when it comes to endo in my clinic. And so it's a fun little quiz that kind of walks you through some of the top things that I tend to see. And then you get some kind of personalized tips from me at the end based on your diet type. If you want to come and chat with me, you can head to my website, the dietologist.com.au, and apply to work with me there. And I'm also releasing a new program shortly called Get Pregnant with Endo, which will be a 12-week comprehensive program that you can do self-paced or with my guidance to help walk you through all the dietary stuff when it comes to endometriosis. And I'm really excited to have a few experts come on and be interviewed for the program as well.
Excellent. Such a needed resource. And thank you so much for joining us and talking all things endo, Stefanie Valakas.
Thanks so much, Jennifer.
Excellent. Now, if you enjoyed this as much as I did, make sure that you share this video, give it a little love, give it a like. Make sure you subscribe to this channel as well, because this is just one of many amazing interviews set to take you back and get control of your fertility journey. So thanks so much for joining us on Infertility Unfiltered.